on route to do things that I was hating.
In front of that, dia. They called him Diabal. So the person that created the human race was now slandered with the term Diabal. Diabal becomes Diablo, Diablo becomes devil. Okay? Now, in order to have the slave believe this, you have to also have something else on the other side, making it look that much more evil. So what does he do? Enlil puts himself up on a pedestal, and he says, from now on, you will never utter the term Enlil. From now on, you will call me Gad. Now, from the term Gad comes the term God. So, the devil created you, God destroyed you. That's the message here, okay? This is why this becomes so damn volatile and forbidden, because everything you've learned is asked backwards. The devil was never that bad, and God was never that all-loving, okay? You know, I'm not making him out to be a saint. He had his own selfish methods for doing what he did. But on the other hand, you know, the point is, that which you call the devil and that which you call God are biological brothers tied at the hip in a feudal sibling war, okay? So why the hell are you picking one side over the other when these two assholes were trying to destroy each other in the first place, all right? He's a sadistic pig. Doesn't give a shit about you. And him, well, he knew he was going to start a rebellion that nobody could win, okay? But in the end of it all, he is the one that saved our asses with something he did before he left, before he got banished from this kingdom, before he was permanently labeled as Diabol, before he left with the anointed ones. He did something for the Adabas. Okay? He pricked his finger and put his blood into the slave. Now from that day forward, and remember, this combined with this becomes the foundation for the Moorish legacy in terms of real estate investing, global real estate investing, the throne of power. That drop of blood put into the Adapa created the biggest damn enigma that to this day the entire galactic community is still trying to figure out how to get around it with feudal law. Because by putting royal Syrian blood into the beast, he then gave the beast the right to be custodians of the throne of power, custodians of earth. It made them the rightful blood heirs of this planet, and if you make them blood heirs of this planet, that means they control the entire kingdom. Okay? That was the ultimate stab in the back to the system, because even the Satar queens couldn't argue against that. So how do you get around it? That's when he starts his whole propaganda campaign, I am God, my brother is the devil, and starts reprogramming all the slaves. Okay? Now, he's got that going on. With this feuding going on, there's another interesting group who was associated with all this along the way, who we haven't mentioned yet. And of course, you know them already as the Greys. Okay? Now, what's the role that they played? Well, with this going on, and in relation to the Anunnaki Syrians and the Satar queens, they operated as the SS Gestapo. In fact, they were allowed to walk freely among the population, and they were known as the stone builders at the time, henceforth stone mason. All right? They are in keeping with the idea of a corporate, corporeal body. They are the bean counters of the corporation. They are mathematical, calculating little bastards. Okay? Soulless to the core. All right? They have a very close relationship with reptilian blood, even though they were sent down to keep things in order and spy for the queens to keep these guys in line. Because they knew the feud here, was going to blow up sooner or later. They calculate in their mathematical and logical equations that they can run the whole corporate operation a hell of a lot better in this kingdom than these two imbeciles here fighting with each other, okay? So they wait. He's thrown out. The slaves are reprogrammed to forget him. Okay? He's in charge by himself now. Okay? But there's an interesting thing that happened. Ea had a son, Marduk. Not exactly the sharpest tool in the shed, okay? And it's in the name, Marduk. What is a duk? A Syrian dog of war. Mar, well, it's a reference to the god of war, okay? Marduk, all right, one of the Syrians. The Greys knew exactly how to manipulate the whole situation to their favor. They played both sides against the middle. They went to Marduk, knowing he was a dumbass, but also the son of Prince Ea. They went to him and said, you see what they did to your father? You want to get even? We'll help you. We'll back you in the next campaign for control. Marduk's like, yeah, because what were the Greys doing? They were banking on inflating his ego because he was too dumb to think any other way. So they blew up his ego and told him, you're the one who should be in charge, and we'll back you. Marduk leads the revolt against Enlil, throws out Enlil, now takes over middle management with the Anunnaki, at which point the Greys realize that with this imbecile at the head of the game, they can easily take over. So they follow through on their plot, go after Marduk, throw him out, throw the Anunnaki out, lock down the whole damn kingdom, and from that point on, they take over the entire operation. Now, of course, with all this going on, you have to ask yourself, what saved their asses from being eliminated by them? Because this was a total violation of the treaties and relationships for producing a bottom line profit for the corporation. Well, the fact of the matter was, they were sent by the Sitar queens, and after they took over, they went to the queen and said, look, Anu's sons are a bunch of imbeciles ruining your bottom line. If we take over, we'll run everything on a dime, and you'll get your profit every time. So the Greys have been skating by on thin ice ever since then, with the promise that they'll keep the paycheck going to the queens to keep everybody happy. But of course, this created animosity with Anu, who was the favored one by the Sitars. As you can tell, the history of this solar system is like a soap opera on steroids, all right? So you've got that going, a total lockdown on the planet. The Greys take over. Well, something interesting happens here, okay? From the Greys, they decide, why knock a good thing? They decide to, based on the two-party system that already existed, they reinvent the two-party system. Only in their case, they call it, because of course now they are suddenly thrusted into the position of upper management. They wanted to recede into the background. They needed to reestablish a new two-party system to do all the work for them. So upper management, in this two-party system that's created by them, they invent the Raka pharaohs, okay, and the Raka shields, okay. And of course, as you already figured out, from Raka pharaoh comes the term Rockefeller. From Raka shields comes the term Rothschild, two-party system, okay. They invented that. Now, they were known as the Stone Masons, and since they were allowed to walk freely among the population like a Schutzstaffel, they became known as the Freemasons. Greys are the Freemasons, okay? This is why there's always this favoritism towards the pale-skinned abomination that does not belong to the family of man. Why? So they get this far here, okay? Knowing that, in comes the Ankhils and the Moorish legacy. The Ankhils, who had a relationship with Ea and Ninhursag, saw all this crap going down. And even though they did not have a direct relationship with what was going on, they couldn't exactly step in forcibly. That wasn't their way. They realized where the gene for passion went and where the royal blood went. Okay? They decided, let's do it that way. This serves as the beginning of the concept of guerrilla warfare, operating underground, all right? From the gene for passion, from the concept of the anointed ones, comes the Moorish legacy. That Moorish legacy is represented by the term Temple of Solomon. And it's in the name, just like the word Adam, Solomon, you break it down to 3 syllables, Sol, Oman. Sol is Latin for sun, Om, sound, sound to light. So Om is frequency, and On is Sanskrit for sound to light. Basically, the name Solomon is a linguistic symbolism for awakening the beast. Okay? And of course, the Temple of Solomon is symbolically associated with gold, because gold is the perfect conductor of electricity, which brings us back to the concept of Frankenstein's monster being awakened. Okay? By using gold as a conduit, the beast is awakened. It's a symbolism. Some people argue, oh yes, the Temple of Solomon really exists, there really is the gold. Okay, whatever, but who cares? What are you going to do when you find it? They're going to put a gun to your head and pull the trigger anyway. So who cares if it really exists? What matters is, towards this legacy, towards the family of man, it must be understood that the Temple of Solomon is a powerful symbolism for keeping the body healthy and pure. Okay? From what had happened here was that you've got the family of man now, inheriting the Moorish legacy, inheriting the legacy of the anointed ones, through the Temple of Solomon, using it as almost like a filter, a spiritual filter. The gene for passion filtered through the Temple of Solomon becomes what you guys know as the passion of the Christ. Okay? Now, the term Christ, a bastardized term, spelt with CH, which is an Anglo-Saxon English spelling, totally wrong. The original proper spelling of it, it's not someone's last name. It's a title. It's a title for all major prophets. Every major prophet is called a Christ. It is spelled K-R-I-S-T, not C-H. K-R-I-S-T, Muhammad the Christ, Buddha the Christ, Isa, the one you call Jesus, the Christ, okay? Noble Drew Ali, the Christ, okay? Adam, the Christ. This is why you get the concept of the Christ energy coming through the bloodline of the prophets. It came from the gene for passion that was pumped into the anointed ones, okay? Now, being that the Greys were not stupid. They knew what was still there. They knew they couldn't, even with the Arion technology, they couldn't fully erase that gene for passion. They couldn't get to the anointed ones. They were hiding out. And even with the Adapas, they had to constantly keep them brainwashed. And God forbid they should be taught by the Iesu to wake up and realize their true legacy as custodians of the earth. You don't want the slave population waking up to that. What had happened was that with the Moorish legacy coming out of Africa, Mother Africa, all right? That's an important term because later on it's slandered and erased by the Masonic agenda and therefore called the Dark Continent, all right? What had happened was that there was a certain segment of the population in northern Africa which started becoming very warlike, losing its way with Mother Nature, losing its connection and responsibility. Remember, custodians of the land, responsibility to Mother Earth. This particular population in northern Africa started acting very warlike, troublesome. They lost their way. They began to experiment on themselves, mutilate themselves, to the point where they bled all of the color right out of their skin. No more color. They became the pale skins, what you now know as Caucasian. They became so warlike and such a big problem that the rest of the Moorish people got together and was like, what the hell are we going to do with these guys? You know, they just won't stop. They're going to overtake everything and destroy us. So they decided to banish them. This is where you get the concept of being banished from the Garden of Eden. Okay? They decided to banish them, and by banishing them, they had to pick a spot to stick them. Well, there's only one continent on the planet that doesn't start with the letter A, and that's Europe. It's in the name, your rope. Rope, you hung yourself, okay? Europe is named after the African queen Europa. Europe was a dead wasteland, and it was used as a transcontinental prison to dump all the assholes who were causing the problem, namely the paleskins. So what happened was they cast it out of Africa because they couldn't stay there anymore anyway. They had burned all the color out of their skin. No more melanin. You can't sit in the sun anymore. I burn like a lobster when I go to the beach. So they had to get out of there anyway for health reasons. There were several reasons. One, they were no longer part of the family of men. Two, they were pale skinned. They couldn't stay in the sun anymore. Three, they were destroying the environment, polluting it, experimenting on themselves in abominable ways, producing these defective genetic offspring that you wouldn't even want to speak of. A good example would be the abominations you saw in Lord of the Rings trilogy, all those disgusting things that were created by Sauron, okay? They dragged them across the deserts of Arabia. This is where the bitterness begins. Their pale skin being scorched by the desert, and dumped them in the cooler, less sun-like atmosphere of Europe, and leave them there. Perfect prison. Why? Because to the north you got snow, to the south you've got the mountain ranges, to the west you've got the Atlantic Ocean, and to the east, lo and behold, out of nowhere comes the Great Wall of China. You have to remember what comprised the Moorish legacy. It was known as the Amexem Empire. Now, the entire Amexem Empire went from Mongolia to South Africa, over to South America, and up through all of North America. They were known as the Asiatic nations. The Amexem Empire, the Moorish legacy. Okay, the family of man. And then you've got this orphan over here called Europe that nobody wanted. Okay? And of course, with the Great Wall of China, the academics tell you, oh, the wall was built to keep the barbaric hordes out, but no one ever bothers to ask who the hell the barbaric hordes were. The point is, it was built to keep them in, so they couldn't go anywhere. All right? And of course, in referencing the mountain ranges, there was one particular mountain range. You got the Sierra, the Nevada, the Caucasus. One particular mountain range called the Caucasus that a lot of them hung around. So this is how the term Caucasian becomes associated with the pale skin. It's not even a real term. Okay, it's like we're using the term Negro to describe black people. It just means black, and that's why it was picked. It has nothing to do with genealogy. Caucasian is also a dumbass term. So this is how those ridiculous things come about. But what had happened was that they were casted out. They were embarrassed. They realized, once they were dumped in Europe in this barren, dead wasteland that meant nothing to anyone in the family of man, they realized what they had done wrong. This is where you get the concept of like Adam and Eve feeling embarrassed and wanting to cover themselves, okay? Whereas before that they ran around naked. But they were so embarrassed about what had happened, they went into this massive psychological denial about the whole thing and started inventing all sorts of other bullshit mythology, monkeys coming down from the tree, even to the idea of being born of a she-wolf. Okay? This is what they were grasping at straws because they couldn't admit that they had been banished from the family of man, lost the color from their skin, and were no longer part of that family anymore. And this is the great sin they committed against themselves. This is why they were banished. Well, the idea is, who created a rebellion within the family of, who created this rebellion in the Moorish legacy? Much the same way as the CIA does it to every country. These scumbags, in an effort to get even with the family of man, because the family of man had the gene for passion, the passion of the Christ, they started that insurgency in North Africa. Okay? And this is how they began to experiment on themselves. Now, what were the Greys trying to do? Well, for one thing, they were trying to destroy this. They had a vendetta against that because they knew it came from the Anquils, which were associated with Ea and Ninhursag. On top of that, they were also looking for a good, obedient slave race. Okay? And what better way to do that than to corner someone who's just been casted out and embarrassed for their own sin? So, the Greys, who themselves, of course, always favor the, yes? Oh, okay. We're going to have to stop, huh? Okay. Well, that's it. Yeah. Okay. The Greys go to the casted out paleskins and they say, Do you want to get back on top of the food chain? You want to get even? Because, of course, they didn't learn their lesson, and the Greys knew that by approaching them early on, they would be able to capitalize on that feeling of vendetta and viciousness. So they say to him, we'll put you on the top of everything. If you obey us from this day forward, we will give you all the technology you need to go out there and do one thing for us. Colonize the living hell out of everyone and destroy the family of man. Destroy them, destroy them, destroy them. So from that day forward, those original European paleskins sold out the rest of the human race by agreeing to it, and by agreeing to it in feudal law, that means all of their pale-skinned descendants were now obedient to that system. And this is why, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Europe shows up on the scene as a world superpower, going out, destroying, colonizing, and massacring everyone in their path. Okay? Doing it to Africa, doing it to the Middle East, doing it to the Western Hemisphere and the Americas. This was their agenda, their motive, their Masonic operation. They were known as the original Freemasons. By gaining the allegiance of the casted out paleskins, they then handed off that mantle to the paleskins. And this is how the extraterrestrial connection of Freemasonry becomes an earthbound Freemasonry. That's where Freemasonry came from, and it was created solely for the purpose of burying the Moorish legacy. This is why when you see this crap on the History Channel and all they talk about is these damn white scholars and academics. Oh, Freemasonry's gone. Yeah, well, if you're asking the enemy, of course they're going to say that, okay? Try asking a dark-skinned black Native American or a black African. See what kind of an answer you get from them, okay? But we're so busy labeling these people as with bows and arrows and spear chucking that, the so-called established community won't listen. But all the answers are there. You're just not asking the right people. You have to go to the other 70% that represents the majority of the population. So that's where it comes with that. So along the way, these prophets, there's no such thing as a pale-skinned prophet. Prophets are meant for those who are oppressed. 70% of the planet is oppressed by the other 30%. Pale-skinned prophet would be an abomination. Okay? There's no such thing as a pale-skinned prophet. The sad thing that black Masons will never be allowed to learn as lackeys for their white Mason counterparts is that they'll never be allowed to become 33rd degree Masons, because if they did, they'd be given a $10,000 pass by the Vatican to go to the House of Omar in Jerusalem and see the perfectly preserved body of Guru Master Prophet Isa, Jesus Christ, and what they would see is a black man. So there's no such thing as a pale-skinned prophet. This, of course, also helps us disseminate truth from fiction in terms of apparitions and visions and crap like that. If you're looking at, some extraterrestrial, paranormal, or supernatural apparition, and you think you've seen the Virgin Mary or Jesus Christ or Joseph, the first question out of your mouth is, were they white or black? If they were white, they saw something else. They didn't see that. Okay? So any of this crap you hear about, the Virgin Mother coming and she's described in this, white porcelain, pure Caucasian skin, no. Okay? There was something there, but it wasn't that. If you read the book Heavenly Lights, the apparitions of Fatima and the UFO phenomena, you'll see how all those so-called religious things, which were skewed towards white Christianity, belong to the realm of alien contact, definitively and scientifically. Okay? But I'll leave it there.